Rum is it's a good coup drink.
Oh, goes great with the coup.
The drink of the best. I don't coup often, but when I do coup, I
do coup.
You had Katherine met the Queen.
I mean, Australia is the ultimate power bottom.
Yeah, it's a coup in the sense that
I don't want to do themes anymore if you guys aren't going to follow the theme. I'm so out of it today.
Commonwealth, the former empire, now Commonwealth. Is it relevant? Probably not. But why not give this part a shot? Stay tuned. Here comes Uncommonwealth, the podcast.
And we're live from the Uncommonwealth Pandemic Studios.
You were going to say pandemia, weren't you? Like
I
Piers.
was, and I didn't want to steal. I was like, that's Pierce's thing.
The podcast.
We have a theme today. Wait, do we say that? The theme is coups, right?
I thought it was coups. I thought it was two-door convertible cars.
Yeah, the theme is that place where chickens live.
The one I chose was this 1973 Chilean coup d'etat.
Thank God. I was nervous.
You guys,
I was nervous you picked the same one as me.
It happened during, hang on, let me make sure I get this right. Yes.
If you say the Nixon administration.
Yes, it
No
did.
way.
I poured over the research, as you can imagine, for hours on hand during my quarantine with my 3-month-old baby, trying to find a coup that happened because Nixon made it happen. And this one did. Seriously. So what happened in 1973, which is the coup happened on September 11th, weirdly. So September 11th was already an ominous day before the U.S. took that away from Chile. But anyway, 1973, Nixon is in power and he put in a bunch of economic sanctions because there was a democratically elected socialist President Salvador Allende, I'm going to say. So that was the government that was in place, and he was supported by Castro because it was like relatively left wing, and Nixon was so freaked out by Castro and what was happening in Cuba that he was like, we need to find some guy to go in there and overthrow this government. So it was a CIA-backed coup d'etat. So they chose a real dick to do this for them. They chose a guy named.
Do you mean like someone called Richard? Is that the guy? Or you say he's a bad dude?
He was a bad dude, and not named Richard, which would be a weird name in Chile. But his name was General Augusto Pinochet.
Ricardo.
Like his first name was General?
He took Pinochet. He took over. It was completely CIA backed, and that was all like later released in CIA declassified documents. But he ended up having a 17-year dictatorial.
Tic-tac-toe.
That doesn't seem like a word.
Kath, I can't believe you pronounce his name correctly, but can't say dictatorial.
Dictatorial.
Dictatorial?
Dictatorial? Dictatorial.
So he managed the coup from a kind of a suburban area just outside Santiago.
If you want to manage a coup, you want to be in nice comfortable burbs. You don't want to be in that inner city environment.
Yes.
That's what they said. It was a suburban outpost. There were, this was CIA backed because there were fighter jets. I mean, they weren't American fighter jets, but it was serious. And they actually...
Anytime you see fighter jets, you think CIA.
Oh, big time. That for those 4th of July parades, when they fly over, I'm like, the CIA is up to something.
So anyway, they fired missiles on the government headquarters. And the Allende, the existing president who was democratically elected and for all intents and purposes was actually a pretty decent president, but the U.S. was against, committed suicide, even though they offered him safe passage, like if he wanted to leave, but he was too proud to do that. He killed himself in his office. And then that became a really shitty government for the people. They rounded up Marxist supporters and tortured them. It was a really disastrous kind of thing. And before the coup, Chile was like considered a beacon of democracy in a place in South America that was not particularly democratic. So the U.S.
After the coup,
and
they
Nixon.
developed baby back ribs.
Are they from
I
Chile?
don't get it.
Is that a Chilean dish? Or
No.
is that just way over my head?
Chile's the restaurant. The
Chili's
Oh.
baby back ribs.
Oh.
Ah, okay. Different spelling, mate.
All right, I actually thought I did pretty well. It just
Catherine,
maybe wasn't
great.
that entertaining.
That
I
was
gotta
great.
say, I'm so
That was
impressed
great.
by your research. Usually, you wouldn't have any of those kind of details. That's very impressive.
Oh, Jimmy.
Please do not check any of them.
But at the time, was America's involvement known, or was that all? That was all like super
I don't
secret.
think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Bloody America, covertly causing coups all over the world.
They must have known from the fighter jet.
Oh, of course.
So
Good
it
point.
says-
Good point.
Yeah, it just says declassified documents later showed, but it wasn't
right.
public that the CIA had for years attempted to get rid of that president.
Oh no, what was the U.S. interest in Chile? Like, what was the sort of rare earth mineral or something that they were?
Nixon was afraid that Marxism was going to sweep, like everywhere was going to become a socialist
we were
country.
still terrified of communism. At this
Do you
I can't
guys see
remember
what
what you said.
happens when
You, Jimmy.
when I do my research? Is that the segment becomes progressively less fun?
The coup I'm talking about is, I've loosely used the term coup. It was actually,
because it's actually an animal.
um,
Just makes a
I've
coup
also
sound.
got a loose coup.
I'm all about loose coup. Okay, so this is
the loose
the
coup.
this is the Great
gross.
Siege of
Ah.
Gibraltar.
Oh,
I was cut up on loose coups, so
It's fun because it's a failed siege. This is the longest siege in history where the French and
wow.
Spanish troops tried to take over Gibraltar from the English, and they failed spectacularly.
I thought the longest siege ever was like Stalingrad in World War II.
Maybe I've done a
Wow.
Catherine just now.
But anyway,
This was also
this is a pretty
Wow.
long one, I bet.
maybe it was at the time because this, of course,
Oh,
this,
that would make sense.
yeah.
Pre-
So there you go.
Stalingrad.
Because this occurred at the very end, or actually after the American War for Independence. So obviously the American War for Independence that ended with the British defeat in Yorktown in 1781, as
Yes,
we all know
obviously.
from Hamilton. But this
Oh.
siege actually didn't finish till 1782, so like it kept going afterwards.
Ooh.
But if you don't know, Gibraltar is a British territory on the bottom of the Iberian Peninsula below Spain. It's tiny.
Is bottom a technical term?
Bottom is a technical term. So
Loose
it
coups and
means
bottoms.
it's actually a power bottom in the in
bottom
the
of
geographical world. The Rock of Gibraltar is the power bottom of the Iberian Peninsula.
Europe.
It's 6.2 square kilometers, so it's tiny.
Oh, wow.
32,000 people is all that live there, and so Lauren's dad was actually born there. He's a British citizen, and
Oh.
his mother, so Lauren's grandmother, met the Queen when she came to Gibraltar for a high tea.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Does she have citizenship?
Lauren does. Yeah, Lauren has British
Whoa.
citizenship through it.
Very cool.
really?
Yeah.
You had
Yeah.
Catherine
Wow.
met the Queen.
No, it's like such a cool fun fact because Gibraltar is so tiny, and so
Yeah.
Lauren's grandmother was a member of the Gibraltar Country Club, whatever it's called.
Right.
And so when the Queen came to visit, she was just one of the people that was invited to this. Anyway, so the very quick summary of the Great Siege of Gibraltar is the Spanish and the French troops had wildly outnumbered the British. The British people in Gibraltar had way more ships, way more guns, way more everything, but they just lost. The British defeated them. But the fun fact I want to focus on is at the very start of this siege, because it went for about 3 years. The very start, the plan was just to starve out the British troops in this fortification. That was a plan. So they blockaded the entry, so they couldn't sail ships in, and they were just going to let the troops starve to death. And when the British found out about this, they did send some supplies with an armed escort of 21 battleships. And on the way, this British convoy, they literally just happenstanced upon a Spanish convoy. Like they sailed past them. We're like, wait a minute, that's a Spanish convoy over there. Let's go say hello. So they went and took over this Spanish convoy and doubled the amount of supplies they had. Then the Spanish blockade people got wind of this. They said, no way, that's not cool. So they sent out a fleet to go and sink the British naval fleet on the way. They vastly underestimated the strength of the British naval fleet coming to supplies and then lost the defeat. So the British took those supplies. So when they finally turned up,
They
they
lost
had
the defeat. That's like a double negative.
it's a double. Yeah. So they won actually.
Okay.
But the point is that on the way, the British tripled the amount of supplies they brought over because they stumbled upon a random Spanish convoy.
By the way, I love the reference. I'm sure a lot of people died, and I love how it's a fun fact.
Yeah.
That's
Fun fact about
I don't
this.
want to trivialize all the people that drowned in this and all the ships that were. So the British guys on the way to give the people who left England to give supplies to Gibraltar on the way bumped into a Spanish convoy. So they sunk all those ships and took their supplies. And then the actual Spanish military ships who were sieging Gibraltar heard about that and then went off to fight them, but underestimated how strong the British fleet was. And then they lost as well. So now on the way, the British supply convoy had basically tripled the amount of stocks it had. So it turned up and was like, oh, here you go, guys. And all of a sudden, Gibraltar was super well supplied with food and ammunition and gunpowder and more troops. And so the French and Spanish troops were like, well, shit, that did not go as planned. They now have heaps of food and plenty of supplies to fight us. So
Wait, so then some people drowned somehow?
And
When
all the
the naval fleets engaged each other, there were some. Adam was pointing out that I classify a fun fact as the significant loss of life during this naval engagement.
Well, it was fun how they died, not that they died.
Oh, it was a enjoyable death.
and then the coup happened.
And then the coup was a couple of centuries later.
It was pre-coup.
It's pre-coup. It's a coup in the sense that
I don't want to do themes anymore if you guys aren't going to follow the theme.
Well, it was
Coup is a coup.
British and French people trying to take over.
That sounds cool. It's coup-ish.
It's coup-ish.
Coup.
That's
It's
why
a
I
little
said it's a
coup-y.
loose. It's a loose coup. It's coup.
Loose coup.
It's coup
Loose
adjacent.
coup.
It's just a
Giant
whimsical
steaming pile of coup.
The podcast.
Guess what, people? There's more coup.
Surprise!
Another great heaping mouthful of coup. We're going back to 1808 in the New South Wales penal colony. Back before Australia got its groove back.
I
Wait,
apologize.
so New South Wales was Australia? I'm confused.
Okay, so back in 1808, New South Wales was a British penal colony, which
Penal?
meant that penal, yes, which it's,
You go there if you've
different.
committed penis crimes.
It sounds like it's a giant prison, which it technically was, but it was basically a settlement with prisoners overruled
Right.
by
Oh,
by the
You go
military.
there for dick tutorials.
And it was so remote that if you like walked off in any direction, you'd get eaten by a saltwater croc or bitten by a kangaroo. This became known as the Great Rum Rebellion of 1808.
ooh.
Because of a shortage of coins in Australia, there wasn't really that much currency to go around. So they of course created a new kind of currency. They had to have something to barter with to trade. Rum became the trading means of the day. Rather than use money to pay for things, you would pay in rum.
A lot of stores back home, it's still accepted as legal tender.
Is it?
If you don't have a credit card on you, just give them a bottle of Bundy rum. They'll sell you something for that.
So what's the connection between Australia and New South Wales?
It's a territory in Australia.
Australia is a state.
Wait, New South Wales is a state in Australia,
Yeah.
or is it? Okay,
Wait, what did I say? Did I not say
you
that?
said the other way around.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's a southern hemisphere, so everything's backwards there.
I was like, wait. Australia is the ultimate power bottom.
Yeah.
So rum has become the currency of the day in the British penal colony of New South Wales, and basically the military who were meant to be looking after the prisoners and everything eventually sort of did the shady thing and became basically the mafia, controlling the rum trade and sort of hoarding it and using it for their own personal wealth.
So,
and
Piers,
gain.
is this just like in modern prisons where, say, cigarettes or other
Yes,
illicit substances are the
exactly.
currency, and then the prison guards
Exactly.
get in on it? So, just in
Yeah.
Australia, we're like, no, we don't want the smokes. We'll take the rum, thanks, as our
Yeah.
currency.
And do you guys remember when I did that segment on accents when I said that the Australian accent is because people were drunk all the time and they
Yes.
couldn't do the British accent properly?
Because our currency was
This-
rum.
This is coming full circle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it takes, this is back in the day when, Australia being so far from England, from where the head of state of Australia truly is.
Well,
what did
hold
it
on a
take?
minute,
It
mate.
took a year on a ship to get like a
Right.
message there. So basically, the Gestapo rum runners are holding rule over this colony. It took 2 years before the British government found out about it, and of course didn't like it, and sent someone over to oversee this. And this guy William Bligh, who was actually, if you ever read Mutiny on the Bounty, he was the captain that got mutinied on the Bounty. This guy didn't have a lot of luck. He comes in and tries to throw his weight around, and basically the military take over. Not only do they throw him out of New South Wales penal colony, they take over the capital.
Sounds coup-ish.
It's closer to a coup than my segment, that's for sure.
They coup all over the British government.
Coup all over their faces from the sounds of things.
They just cooed all over Captain Bligh's life, his family's life, just coup everywhere. Wait, where was I? So
just start again.
So the British eventually get wind of this and send a guy over to restore order in Australia, and he comes in and basically implements prohibition and destroys all their distilleries and whatever. So the military that were in charge of the penal colony didn't like this one bit, and they, together with the inmates, basically overthrew the entire Australian government very, very easily in January of 1808. And they were in charge of Australia for 2 years. Like I said before, it takes a year for the message to get there, and then a year for the troops to come back. So they had a good 2 years where they lived it up like pirates down
in the good old days.
Down in the good old days, until England sent more troops and restored order. Everything went back to business as usual. But I don't think after that.
So far, Piers, this is on theme and related to the Commonwealth. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, this is 100% coup.
And alcohol has alcohol in it.
Coup.
So
Full coup.
Full coup.
Cuckoo.
Uncommonwealth.
One more coup to go.
A final coup.
The coup de grace, as they say.
Adam's been waiting all episode to say that.
I want to talk about the most famous coup ever, I think, in the history. Yeah, when Scar overthrew Mustafa in The Lion King. I think that is the most.
I almost picked that segment, Adam.
Actually, that's not what I'm going to talk about. I just wanted to say that.
No!
I want to talk about.
Can't tease The Lion King coup and then not do it.
I want to talk about the FLQ, the Font de Liberation de Quebec.
Oh my gosh, Jimmy.
I'm so upset.
That was kind of sad.
I was literally going to do the Scar coup and decided against it. I was like, no, I'll pick a real life thing, because you would all probably tease me if I did a Lion King thing.
You opted not to do the most famous coup ever for not a coup. All right, so the Front de Liberation du Quebec, so FLQ, was a left-wing Quebecois nationalist and Marxist-Leninist paramilitary group in Quebec that was active from 1963 to 1970 and was regarded as a terrorist organization. Their basic desire was for Quebec to separate from Canada and to be its own independent country. And there have been two referendums in Canada for Quebec. The first was in 1980, and 70% of Quebec's population rejected the idea.
Oh, wow.
So it was and then the next one was 15 years later in 1995, and 50.85% voted against seceding.
Whoa.
So that was pretty
close.
That was pretty tight. And there's a lot of debate around what if in 95 that you knew it was going to be close. And there was a lot of debate about even if they vote that they want to leave, it doesn't mean they can leave. And there are a lot of issues around like defense and monetary policy and currency and international trade and various things.
What was the big thing with the sentiment? Because that's like
it's a big shift, yeah.
But like, what do you know what the underlying cause was? Because that's a huge change in public kind of sentiment.
Nixon?
There.
Maybe.
Well, 95.
Did you just say Nixon? With a question.
Was it the CIA?
Could have been. You never know.
I think what happened in 95, by the way, was the federal government under Prime Minister Brian Mulroney was trying to get Quebec to ratify some changes to the Canadian Constitution that were seen as like anti-French Canada. And so after two failed attempts to get these constitutional amendments ratified, I think it upset a lot of the French-speaking people who grew increasingly concerned that like their culture was just going to get swallowed up by English Canada. And there's also a religious element to it, whereas like the majority of people in Quebec are Catholic versus like sort of Protestant Anglican people historically in the rest of Canada. So all this stuff always comes down to like some sort of religious disagreement, right? But the big two events, and this is so crazy to think this was Canada, but the FLQ, they bombed the Montreal Stock Exchange in 1969. And then in 1970, they kidnapped British Trade Commissioner named James Cross. And in the subsequent negotiations around the kidnapping, they kidnapped the provincial labor minister, Pierre Laporte, and executed him.
Whoa.
Like literally execute. And that led to like the military being called in and the whole thing. They all got shut down. Everyone got arrested. And
jeez, because
this is like a group.
This is like the 70s, you said, right?
Yes, it was in 1970. It was called the October Crisis in 1970.
That's crazy.
And it's crazy.
What was the going?
Well, it was a different time in 1970, right? Because the 60s were all Vietnam. Like even though Canada wasn't sort of involved in Vietnam, the sentiment and the anti-government rebellious spirit, was alive.
How did they execute him?
I don't know if it was chop his head off style. I think it was just
I just think it's important. We know.
But the KGB was involved, which is kind of fun. The KGB.
I mean, would that have been the KGB under Vladimir Putin
in the 1970s?
Not
maybe
the 70s.
I don't know if he was in charge of it yet, but he was probably there already.
He was the head. He was the head for a while.
For a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, this is great. The KGB established contact with the FLQ in 1970, and later the KGB apparently forged documents to try to portray the FLQ as a CIA false flag operation. But no one bought it.
This is intense.
And then a bunch of the FLQ folks fled to Cuba at the end as this sort of whole thing unraveled. Other than this stuff in the 70s, the Quebec separatist movement has been very peaceful. Like
7 days after Laporte went missing, his body was found in the trunk of a car. Later in 2010, journalists have been producing or figuring out that it potentially was an unintentional death, that he was strangled in a moment of panic. I'm really
maybe he was
research.
masturbating and he just while he was kidnapped.
Autoerotic asphyxiation.
And this kind of changes everything.
It's definitely a possibility, Adam. Let's not rule it out.
We're gonna definitely cut that part out.
That would probably. It's a good idea though if you've been captured.
Just to masturbate to establish dominance.
But it's sort of it was an interesting period of history where you had this separatist movement that led to kind of violence. To what end?
Yeah,
that's kind of what made me think of this is like, so you kidnapped, like, what do you think's going to happen? You're gonna like your demand for kidnapping is for Quebec to secede from Canada. It's not gonna
Well, that was
not gonna end well.
That's exactly what happened the other day. I bet if they had any success, they wouldn't have known what to do with themselves. Like a dog. Like my dog tries to kill a squirrel every time he goes to the park. I don't think he'd know what to do if he
caught one. This is a hot take. It's possible these guys don't actually have a well thought out plan.
But I think that is a lot of. I did read up on a lot of coups that sadly didn't happen in the Commonwealth. A lot of them do seem to be successful, and then they don't know what to do with themselves once they've succeeded, and they're eventually overthrown.
Oh, I'm pretty sure there's a George Washington quote about how now that they've won the war, now the hard part is running the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
I mean, depending on your time horizon,
George Washington. That was spot on.
You could argue that like the Russian Revolution failed. It lasted from 1917 until early 90s.
What was it? 991 was the Soviet coup attempt against.
I feel like what we've learned here is that you're more likely to be successful at a coup if you're drunk on rum.
Rum is it's a good coup drink.
Goes great with the coup.
The drink of the best. I don't coup often, but when I do coup, I do
coup. I don't often coup, but when I do coup.
Oh, I had an explosive coup the other day.
Like the Empire, we're almost done. We hope that you had lots of fun. Was it relevant? Probably not. But thanks for giving this part a shot. Stay tuned for the end of Uncommon Wealth, the podcast. Stay tuned for Uncommon Takes.
You know what we call 1808 in Australia?
What?
We actually call that 6:08 in the evening.
Oh.
Okay, cut that one, please. Cut that one, please.
That's the worst joke in 45 episodes.
I didn't think it was a joke at first, or that was just a fact.
Uncommon Takes.
You guys should see Arthur's coups. They are
they
really
solid yet?
runny. No, not solid.
No solid coup.
All diarrhea.
Whoa! What are you talking about?
You just broke.
We're talking about coups over here, Catherine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised Arthur is attempting a coup. It's young children always rebel against authority.
Uncommon Wealth, the podcast.